If you're struggling to stay motivated to code, you can't focus, you can't concentrate for long periods of time, I want to share a framework with you. Now, I didn't set out to create this, it just kind of happened over time. I noticed that certain things helped me to stick with coding for longer, even when I didn't feel motivated. And once I leaned into those things, everything just got a lot easier. And that's exactly what is in this framework. I call it the Spark framework. There's 5 practical steps that will help you really double your motivation, stay consistent and stop feeling stuck along the way. This isn't, about grinding or hustling your way through. It's about making coding easier so that motivation takes care of itself. But before I do, let's talk about why people lose motivation when it comes to coding. At first, when you're learning, it's exciting, right? Everything's brand new. Every little win feels just amazing. You actually want to sit down to code, but then a few weeks in, that excitement, it starts to fade. You open up your laptop, you stare at a project, and instead of making progress, you start finding reasons to do something else. You think maybe I should watch another tutorial first. Maybe I need to start over because I don't really get it yet. And suddenly you're kind of stuck in this loop of learning, doubting, procrastinating, and just repeating, right? And I know this because I've been there more than once, mind you. And what I've realized is this: motivation, like I said, isn't something that you don't have, it's something that you build. The biggest mistake people make is thinking that they need to feel motivated to sit down to code. But motivation doesn't come first. Action comes first. And once you start working in a way that makes coding easier, motivation just takes care of itself. And that is where this Spark framework comes in. So let's break each piece of this framework down. So the first part of this framework is called structure. It's all about why a plan beats feeling motivated. So most people, when they sit down to start to learn to code or start thinking about coding, they just sit down and they're like, okay, let's just do this. But they do it without a plan. And it's like kind of going to the gym with no workout routine. You just sort of wander around. Maybe you do a few random exercises and then you leave. You leave feeling like you didn't really accomplish anything. And I've done this with coding. I'd sit down, open my code editor. I'd waste 30 minutes trying to decide what to work on. And that's when I'd start scrolling, watching another tutorial, or just not doing any coding at all. So to remedy this, I started making decisions and a plan before I sit down. Instead of thinking, I'm going to work on JavaScript today, I try to get super specific. I write things down like, I'm going to finish 2 sections of this course today, then do 2 hours of project work after lunch. Or I write down, today I'm working on my capstone project and I'm blocking everything else out. Or I write, I'm going to focus on responsive design for 1 hour today, and then I'm going to do some deep dive into some JavaScript, advanced JavaScript, for 2 hours after lunch. Small, clear tasks makes it easier to start, which means you don't waste time trying to get into the right headspace. And the best part is that once you start to kind of check off all these small wins, the motivation, it really naturally kicks in. So before your next coding session, my advice is write down exactly what you're going to do, even if it's something really tiny, because when coding feels structured, it feels more doable. And that's really what keeps you going. The second part of this framework is personalization. Now, this one took me way too long to figure out, but if coding feels boring, then you are probably learning it the wrong way. Let me explain what I mean. Now, I followed the usual path, right? Which is tutorials, exercises, random coding challenges that, I didn't really care about. And yeah, of course, I'm learning a ton. But, suffice to say, I wasn't really excited to sit down and code. But all that really changed when I started building something that I actually cared about, something that I actually wanted to use. And suddenly learning wasn't just about completing another tutorial, it was about figuring out how to build my own project. Now, if you are curious about what I'm building, I'll be sharing the details in my newsletter when I launch it. So if you are interested, link is in the description to sign up for my newsletter. But getting back to this part in the framework, the idea is that making coding personal is really the key to stay motivated. If you are stuck doing generic tutorials, try building something that actually matters to you. So for example, if you love traveling, build a spontaneous trip planner. If you are really obsessed with food, why not think about making a recipe app that suggests meals based on what's in your fridge or what's in your pantry? And what about subscriptions? If you keep forgetting the things that you're subscribed to, you're paying for, why don't you build a subscription tracker to stop paying for stuff that you just don't use? Point is, when coding is relevant to your life, it stops feeling like homework and it starts feeling more like something you actually want to work on. You're building the skills to work on the thing that you care about. So take a second, think about something that you already love and now find a way to build something around it. Okay, so moving on. Now, to stay fully focused while coding, you need part A of this framework, and that is achieving flow. Now, I know you've probably heard about getting into flow state before, but let me explain why it's really critical when it comes to coding. Flow is essentially a state where you are just locked in and time just kind of disappears. You're coding, you're making progress, and before you know it, hours have just passed. And honestly, I think getting into flow is probably one of the most important skills that you can develop as a programmer. But here's the thing, flow doesn't happen by accident, right? You have to set yourself up to get into it. And over time, I really figured out what works for me. So let me share it with you because this will probably help you as well. Number one is keep your environment cool. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm too hot, I can't focus, right? I'm just restless, I'm uncomfortable, and coding feels impossible. So for me, staying locked in, it means keeping the temperature cool, whether it's, turning on the air conditioning, using a fan, or even switching rooms completely. Now, this might sound crazy to you, or maybe this is something that you haven't realized, but you agree with. But for me, if I need to, I will just go somewhere completely different. If I'm at a place where it's just too hot, like a cafe or a completely different building, so I can just be still and focused in a room with a cool temperature. The second one that I have here is use focus blocks. Now, I've noticed that I get my best focus in the first 2 to 3 hours after waking up in the morning. That's when my brain is just super fresh. I can get deep into my work. And the same thing after I exercise as well. My mind is just clearer. Distractions, they just fade away, and I can really lock into coding. So I try to time my focus blocks around when I know works best. Now, I can create an entire video on focus, but I think I'm just gonna leave it there for now. Look out for one in the future. The third one is use background noise to stay in the zone. Silence can just feel too quiet. Music with lyrics, can be just way too distracting. The sweet spot I've found is something like lo-fi beats, rain sounds, or just some ambient noise, just enough to kind of block out the distractions, but not so engaging that my brain kind of just wants to sing along to the song or listen to the melody. Number 4 is change your environment when you feel stuck. Now, if you ask me, there's only so much work that you can do at home before your motivation starts to slip, right? And when that happens, I just switch environments because it completely just resets my focus. If I'm feeling, sluggish, I head to a cafe, a library, or a co-working space, somewhere with just the right level of background activity to keep me engaged. And honestly, this works every single time. The fifth one, kind of a weird one, but that is to increase the font size in your code editor. Like I said, this might sound really weird, but trust me, it actually works. When I increase the font size in my code editor, or even on the courses that I'm working on, it does two things. Number one, it forces me to focus on only what's in front of me. Less space on the screen means fewer distractions. And number two, it makes reading easier, which reduces eye strain, and it helps me to stay locked in for longer. This is really just a small tweak, but it massively improves concentration. The bottom line with getting into a flow state is that it isn't something that you wait for, right? It's something that you set up. You have to be intentional with it. Now, the next part of this framework is repetition, but probably not in the way that you're thinking, right? Now, the way that I think about repetition in coding is kind of like a bank robbery. You go into a tutorial, you grab what you need, and you just get out as soon as possible. Instead of watching the entire tutorial from start to finish, you just skim through it first, you get a quick overview without writing any code. Then I just kind of steal what I need. I understand what the core idea is, and then I delete whatever I just wrote and I try and rebuild it from scratch. Now, I'm not talking about hundreds of lines of code here. I'm talking about small blocks of code and doing this on a repetitive nature. It sounds kind of crazy, right? But this method, it actually teaches me two things. Number one, if I remember everything, then I've actually learnt it. And number two, if I struggle, that tells me exactly what I need to review. So what I'm saying is grab what you need, don't waste time, delete the project, and force yourself to build it back from memory. You might have to do this a few times. If you catch yourself looking at the solution, just do it again. Keep going until you can write the entire thing out on your own. And honestly, you will be amazed at how much you will learn doing it this way. And as a bonus, if you do this, it keeps you super engaged because you're not just kind of passively following along. You're actually figuring things out for yourself. Now, the last part of this framework is about keeping momentum. Now, there are two things that can really help you here. Number one is using something called the 1% rule. So instead of trying to make huge leaps overnight, just aim to improve by 1% every day. It might not sound like much, but obviously the crazy part is that 1% growth every day just compounds massively into your progress over time, right? Even if you only code for 10 to 20 minutes per day, that's over 120 hours a year. And the second one is to track your progress publicly. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, it's so much harder to quit when people know that you are doing something. You know, now that I have this channel, it's making me so much more accountable with, you know, being a programmer. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to start a YouTube channel, but you can post your progress on X, you know, Twitter, for example. You can keep a blog. You can join like a coding community and you could post your updates in there. Even if no one is watching, it doesn't matter. It keeps you from quitting on yourself. And honestly, the best part is you'll be able to look back and see how far you've come. So that's the Spark framework. And you know, if you implement this, I know it's going to help you a lot. It's definitely helped me so much in my kind of programming journey. And if you are still here, if you're still watching this video, then you're definitely one of my favorite viewers, right? I want to tell you that if you want more insights like this, I share exclusive tips, you know, more of these kind of frameworks and personal updates in my weekly newsletter. The link is in the description below. I'm actually about to hit publish on a piece about how I stay super focused while coding, something that I haven't been able to cover in a whole lot of depth in this video. You know, a lot of you guys are reaching out to me and there's a lot that I think that I can help with, you know, coming this far, especially if you're struggling to stay consistent. Honestly, you know, sometimes it's just easier to write an email than it is to record and edit an entire video. Plus, it means that I can just go way deeper than I can on a single video on specific topics. So if you're interested, go and check it out. Like I said, link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video and I'll see you guys in the next one.